Hi. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The List. My name is Brett. Coach Fuller will be joining us shortly. Today is our season finale, and we have a special guest. He is a draft analyst for the Draft Network, but also, probably more importantly, an offensive lineman for Clemson University, Mason Johnstone. Mason, thank you for joining me. We're talking a little bit. How's workouts going right now?
Yeah, going good. Thanks for having me on, Brett.
Oh,
I'm excited.
absolutely. I'm going to focus a lot on the draft stuff, but I would want to talk a little bit about Clemson too. My
Okay.
one buddy wanted me to ask because he went to Croatia, but he wanted to know what was it like the first time you ever ran out and touched Howard's Rock? Like how
Uh,
awesome was
there's nothing like it. Even just I remember that first morning waking up, and it wasn't even just about the game. I was like, "Holy crap! I get to run down the hill today." There's just truly because you come out and then the stadium just kind of swallows you as you come down, and it's awesome. There's nothing like it.
that? Yeah. And the other question he had with that was, did you ever feel like you were going to fall over running down that hill?
Everybody always asks that, and I mean, we got those knee braces on, and we take that bus over there. You get a little tight, and I mean, it's definitely on my mind almost every time I run down. I'm not jumping too high on that
That's
hill.
yeah. So just to go, I believe you're a redshirt sophomore if I looked right.
Mhm.
What made you decide to go to Clemson?
I grew up here. I've been really familiar with the program my whole life, and it was just kind of always a dream. So when that opportunity came, it just made too much sense for me.
That's cool. And the impression I get from Dabo Sweeney is he definitely seems like a ball of energy. Like I'm a Michigan fan, and you know what Jim Harbaugh is like,
Yeah.
and I kind of get the impression that Dabo's quite a bit like that. He seems to be beat to his own drum. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he's great. Just like you said, ball energy. He's all over the place, always looking to be helpful, looking to improve people and be a good influence on everybody. So, you know, he's great.
And just for my personal curiosity, because I love following college football, love the
Mhm.
recruiting, love the coaching. Um, you had a coaching change at offensive line at the end of the
Mhm.
season. Now are going with Matt Luke. What kind of difference does Coach Luke make from your previous coaches?
Yeah, Coach Luke is great, and like every offensive line coach, even with my former coach, I took a lot from him, and then obviously Coach Luke's been doing it a long time. He signed and coached Laramie Tunsil, and hearing him, talk about coaching him is just an incredible experience. Just hearing what it takes to be that level of an offensive lineman, and he obviously knows what it takes. So it's been great to learn from him.
Awesome. And speaking of coaches, Coach Fuller joining us now. How's the day been going for you?
It's going hot up here, man.
Did Mason? I don't know how it is down there, but like I said, I'm in Harrisburg, and walk outside, and I feel like I lost 10 pounds within the first 5 minutes.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful here. It was like 93 today, which I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. It felt awful.
Yeah. The thing I will tell anybody who has not been up, Pennsylvania is not always the warmest, but when it's hot, it's also like 100% humidity too. So
Right. Yeah.
it says 95, but it feels like 104 today, and
Yep.
Jeez.
that's been tough. But question with Clemson as well. You ready for the opening game against Georgia? You're going to be in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah. Yeah. No better way to start off college football than Clemson, Georgia. That's going to
Yeah.
be really exciting.
Is that going to be the first time you've played there?
Yeah, it'll be the first time. We might have opened there my freshman year with Georgia Tech, but I didn't travel to that game. I don't know what. I don't. Not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty. It'll be my first time in there. I've never been.
Gotcha. And with Clemson, it looks like you guys 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like you guys lost 6 players to this past draft.
Mhm.
From your experience, which of those players do you think the team will miss most of, like impact, whether it's leadership, on the field, off the field, and who are you personally going to miss the most of the people who left?
Yeah, definitely. Shout my guy Will Putnam out. He signed with the Raiders this off season, and he's fighting for a spot on that team, and it's been really cool to kind of hear his experiences. But I mean, when he was here, he was just, you know, talk a lot about the ebbs and flows of football, and he was a guy that was always just steady, which was a really reassuring way to lead. But yeah, gonna miss him a lot. But all those guys are fantastic players.
Coach, you got anything?
Yeah, so my son is a transitioning lineman from high school to Sacred Heart University. He's going to play center guard for them. Tell me about your transition from being a high school player to going and playing in college.
Yeah, I primarily played on the defensive side of the ball. Like I was just a skinny basketball player my junior year of high school and started playing defensive end. And I mean, if you can run around and be 6'6", like usually that'll work out. But transitioning to offensive line at first was really tough. But the one thing I've had an incredible trainer who's kind of, since I started going to offensive line, has really just been so helpful. But it really shown me, like, I mean, everything when it comes to that position, you can learn. There's nothing like, that's why I always hate it happened with Graham Barton this year, the length argument. And I definitely understand it. I think length is a great attribute to have, but just because you don't have that doesn't mean you can't compensate in other ways. So just finding just kind of that way to work things out as an offensive lineman has been really fun. You lose a lot of reps, and then, now I'm trying to get the hang of it, but that's been a really rewarding experience, just learning.
What's been the toughest transition for you with that?
Weight, definitely weight. Like I said, I didn't lift weights, didn't do anything. I played basketball and thought that's what I'd be doing in college, and there were other plans. But really trying to get stronger, put some weight on. I've put on about 40 pounds since I got to Clemson. I came in really light, so that's been kind of the hardest part, is just getting to that point where I can, suit up.
So I kind of know that from experience with my son, because once the season starts, you'll lose like 20 pounds just playing a game.
Right.
So yeah, the hardest thing for him too has been, keeping the weight on and, keeping it muscle and not fat or water weight. It's got to be muscle.
Right.
You're gonna play in the trenches. You got to be a big guy.
No, absolutely. That's all it is. You got to be that kind of guy to play in the trenches.
Yep.
Yeah, and Mason, I know you did a lot of work, and I mentioned you're with the Draft Network now. I think first time we talked was actually in a draft Discord.
Yeah.
How did that opportunity come up for you, and how have your responsibilities changed, and what actually got you into the scouting aspect?
Yeah, I kind of just, for whatever reason, I've got some family. I've got a cousin that's worked for the Bills for a couple years now, and I've always kind of been interested in the NFL. And in high school, like, I'd be in class and I'd pull up, game film on YouTube, and I didn't really know what I was watching, but I'd sit there and try and grade these guys out and do whatever. So that kind of sparked that interest in scouting. And then Kyle Krabs, which I'm sure you guys know, like, I was a huge fan of him, still am, when he was with the Draft Network, and he really got me into the company. And then, I came in as an intern and did what I could. And obviously Kyle's doing other stuff, but, he got me into it, and he was really a great mentor. And then now now I'm writing some articles for the company, and then still, in the off season, I'll be doing the scouting reports and stuff. So it's been really great. It's been a really, really rewarding experience, being able to be with that company.
So funny story, you mentioned Kyle Krabs. So the whole reason we're called The List is my one buddy, bored he was working, he made a list of Tua haters. And actually, he had me tweet it out, and it actually got onto ESPN. It got onto to Barstool.
Yeah.
But Kyle Krabs was on the original list, and he was not happy about that. And then one of the 3 yards per carry guys, Al Partega, he asked for the list, and my buddy tweeted out. This was about a month or two ago. He tweeted it out to him, but he didn't upload the new one because he took Kyle off the list, but he sent out the old one. And anytime that list pops up, I guess people just start tagging Kyle in it. And
that's so funny.
He's not very happy. He's still getting tagged in those. Yeah. We've tried to apologize to him. He has not accepted that yet, but it's like, you live and you learn.
Yeah, I mean that's really funny. I think I remember seeing that interaction. That was funny.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, whoops. But yeah, that was a fun time. But to keep going with the Draft Network, I remember. I think one thing you said is you really wanted Graham Barton in the draft, and the one guy I remember you saying you did not want was Patrick Paul. Yeah. So not only did we not get Graham Barton, we passed on him. I think we traded. Did we? No, we didn't trade up for Patrick Paul, but we got Patrick Paul in the second round. So, as a Dolphin fan, I kind of want to get your opinions on how your draft experience went, because I was a Chop Robinson fan, so I was kind of like, all right, I'm cool with that.
Right.
Patrick Paul, it was one of those. I see the reasoning, but I would have rather gone somewhere else. So I think most Dolphin fans kind of gave the first 2 days a C, to be kind, and then everybody loved day 3.
Right.
Everybody just loved day 3. So I kind of wanted to get how your personal opinions went with the draft, and also just to get more of your opinion, especially as an offensive lineman, what you like about Patrick Paul, what you really don't, what he needs to work on, and if you agree, we're just not going to see him at all this year.
Right. Yeah, and I, like you said, I admittedly did not really want anything to do with Patrick Paul, but I've watched 2 years of his film. I did a summer and then another report for him. And I remember it was the 2022 game against Tyree Wilson. And I don't remember where I heard this, but Wilson had made a comment that Paul was the best offensive lineman he went against. And I watched that film, and there's some really impressive plays. His game is, hills and valleys sometimes, which, and I understand there's some concern because he is an experienced football player, but there's also that side of, like I mentioned earlier, anything can be learned. And when you're talking about a 6'8" frame with, at 330 pounds and 36.5-inch arms or whatever it was, like it's the same conversation we have with these quarterbacks that are so traitsy, and if they really develop the way you want to and you trust your process, then you say, yeah, we'll take a chance on that guy. And so I definitely understand the Patrick Paul pick, and I also understand the apprehension with it, because you kind of wanted a guy that you felt would play right away. Like you were really confident that he could do that. And Paul's going to be one of those guys that's going to, have to earn it, because even outside of Austin Jackson and Teron Armstead, Kendall Lamb was a good player for us last year as a depth piece. And, that's going to be his competition. And I think, he's hopefully going to be the heir to Teron. He worked with Duke Manyweather. That he's had a really good. I think everything after the Senior Bowl, like all the training videos I saw, like he seemed to be working out some of the kinks in his game. But I'd say, I felt like his film, he was a little bit more of a lumbering athlete than you'd want to see. But that length kind of makes up for it. I felt like, he was a very disciplined and reliable pass protector. So he was patient. He knew how to play with his length. And that's going to be something where, at the very least, you get into a game and he has to go out there. We can do some things with Patrick Paul. Obviously, he's going to get NFL coaching. He's going to improve. So now I'm okay with the pick. I think when it happened, I was a little bit upset, but I really feel like, it's the same kind of conversation we had with Austin Jackson. And I know that was a up and down experience up to this point, but you kind of hope that maybe this has a similar end result.
Yeah. So I will say this, and then I'll let Coach go with it too. you bring up Austin Jackson. I remember watching Austin Jackson's film, and I had no idea why anybody had him as a first-round pick, aside from athleticism. Because I don't know if he still does film, but there was this YouTuber named Vox Lombardi, specialized in offensive line, and he basically said the reason you take Austin Jackson in round 1 is he's athletic enough where he can just stop someone for a second, and you're hoping that becomes that. And I was like, that's not really what I want in round 1, but it was. So I will say this, and I don't know if it's really a compliment, but I'll say Patrick Paul's film is a lot better than Austin Jackson's was coming out of college.
Right.
So.
Right.
So if you remember draft night, when we were live, I had the same reaction to Paul. I did not want him. I thought he was wonky. After looking at it, though, and I could attest to this, that, taking my son around the camps from high school, going into college, and you know this too, Mason, going to college camps. We went to the Pitt camp, Penn State camp, Ohio State camp, and some of the kids will go, why are they looking at that kid? He's terrible. The coaches aren't looking at him being terrible. The coaches are looking at his frame and his build and going, well, he's an okay pass blocker, but I could turn him into an okay, good run blocker. I love his frame. I love how big the guy is. So it's not always how good you are when you're like in high school or how good you are when you're in college. It's what can the coach turn you into?
Right. And that's kind of how I felt with Paul. Like you just said, you're drafting him for what he can do, not what he can't. And like you just said about those camps, like I was one of those kids that was like, I got a bunch of hype in the recruiting process because I told people I was 6'7" and I was new to the position and I had a basketball background. I remember I sent my film to someone and my basketball film, and they ranked me a 3-star. It was like the weirdest.
Oh yeah.
Ever, but that's you're right. I mean, they see potential, and potential can be a dangerous word, but it's what operates in that draft sometimes.
Yep. So something I did want to ask you about, it does seem like and it's still, let's say it is still insanely early in the process to start talking about 2025. But early on, it does seem like at least 2 prospects are at least preseason separating themselves from the rest of the offensive line class. It looks like everybody has Will Campbell of LSU and Kelvin Banks of Texas is the clear top 2 players. I think I've seen a couple mocks, and again, it's way too early to take this as gospel. But I've seen Will Campbell drafted as the first mocked as the first overall pick. If you've started watching film yet, is what you see, does that seem fairly accurate, or is there anybody else you think can shoot up the boards as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think those guys are definitely great players. I've just as a student of the game, I've watched a couple games of them. Just because like you said, they've got some resume, and they've got some real legitimate hype about them. And I think they're great players. I think a lot of people are kind of trying to say that this offensive line class might be weaker, but I really think, like you said, it's too early to tell. And, once this season gets going, I think, you may see a bunch of guys shoot up. I definitely think about our Clemson guys, Blake Miller and Tristan Lee are both guys that definitely are going to be, good players for us and are going to be worth a draft pick to me. And, but yeah, I'm sure I think it'll fluctuate, like it always does, but we'll have to see after this season.
Yeah. It definitely feels like a weird class, because it doesn't even seem like, well, last year, again, it seems like every year we're like, oh, this is a generational quarterback class.
Right.
This year, it doesn't seem like anybody's really high on the quarterbacks yet. Maybe your quarterback can pop up, because I think it's like Quinn Ewers and then the Georgia quarterback, and I'm just like, I don't really see it with those guys. But so like, aside from offensive line, what are your favorite positions to scout?
I'd say defensive ends and D tackles are that's probably the easy answer. Just because for me, like I've played a lot of scout team, and being on the scout team, you hear a lot of the coaching that the D linemen get, and that's been something where it's been fun to connect the dots on what I learned from that side of the ball, and then what I see on film. I love watching tight ends who can block. Like that's just there's this guy played at Minnesota a while ago, and that's one of the guys me and Kyle Krabs kind of bonded over was Ko Kieft. I think that's how you say his name. And
I remember him. Yep.
yeah, and I think he plays for the Bucks now. But I remember I've got videos on my phone from like 3 years ago, and it's just him paving people in the run game, like just this little 245-pound tight end just killing people, and it was art.
Yeah, you bring up tight ends, and that's something. Last 2 years, I've loved both tight end classes. I loved the 2024 tight end class even more than the 2023 one. And the last 2 years, I just come away being like, why are we not taking tight ends? I think Cade Stover would have been perfect for our offense. And Jonnu Smith makes a difference, but you can count on 0 hands how many touchdowns our tight ends had last year. So how did you feel about that position going into the draft? And do you think we should have looked at that as well?
Yeah, that was one of those things after Jonnu Smith, it was kind of like you got the feeling they weren't gonna go in that direction just based on it never seems to go our way, like as fans, with the Dolphins on those picks. But I do think I'm a Julian Hill fan. I thought, he's a guy who on split flow zone and stuff like that, even as a lead blocker in some of our lateral displacement run plays, he's an effective blocker. But like you said, I mean, tight ends now that you have to have pass catchers there. And so I think it's going to be, kind of by committee on how they're included in the run game and the pass game. Even with Smith, I'm sure he'll be highlighted, but it'll be interesting to see how that position group plays out. But I definitely did want us to dip in the bag during the draft.
Oh yeah, there are so many plays. And I hate to say it because I do like Taj Washington, but for a while I was like, well, Jaheim Bell's still available, and then Dallin Holker, the Colorado State tight end, he was one of my favorite players in the draft. Yeah. I was like, well, he's available. So I was just kind of like,
I liked him a lot. Colorado State tight end. He's a good player.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with Mason. I think McDaniels loves Julian Hill, and it's really tough to be an edge blocker, and it's really hard to be an edge blocker as a tight end too. And he's real close. If you watch him, he's a huge guy. He can move a lot, and I think Coach McDaniels likes him a lot.
Yeah. No, I see why. He's got something to him. It's just, the consistency stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. And it seems like the Dolphins as a whole, going back to when I was in college, it seems like they're always looking for that small school wide receiver / tight end to develop. It was John Nalbone back 10 years ago. Then it was, if you remember the first time we were on Hard Knocks, it was I think his name was Wes Brown. He was just a wide receiver from a small school. And then it went viral. They're like, you look great when you're running routes in mini camp, but then you put the pads on.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Who's the last truly good tight end that we've had? With Eric Green?
Charles Clay.
Clay's up there. Anthony Fasano.
Yeah, Clay's good. Yeah, Clay was good.
Yeah.
But like Mason, as a Dolphins fan, I think we were all like you got to take offensive linemen in the first round. I don't think there was a single mock draft that really had us, or anybody who followed the team was like, we're not going anywhere. Again, I was a bigger fan of Chop Robinson. Again, I'm a Michigan fan. If you watch the Michigan-Penn State game, Michigan did not attempt to pass in the second half because our right tackle could not block Chop Robinson. So I liked the pick, but I understand why people were upset. Did you think there was any first of all, did you think there was how shocked were you that we did not go like Graham Barton? Because everybody was saying Barton's the guy.
Right. Yeah, and it was one of those things where, and I think that's what teams of our the way our roster is constructed. I think not going offensive line in the first round could somewhat make sense just because you're really wanting to fill that right guard, maybe center position. Everywhere else you kind of feel good about. And I'm all for being loyal to your guys and inviting that kind of competition with the guys already in the group. But I mean, I think when you're the Dolphins, I think at that point in the draft, best player available was probably the best way to conduct yourself as a team that's wanting to be a legitimate contender. I feel like in the first round, that's kind of where you need to go. And I understand, offensive line was probably what kept us from being a contender last year. But I mean, last year when we were all healthy, we had a great offensive line, and it's just you kind of got bit with the bug. So I understand why we didn't go there, but I definitely would have wanted to. That would have been so fun.
Yeah.
Getting Graham Barton, that would have been awesome. But I'm excited to see what Chop can do.
Yeah. To go with the offensive line too as well, as the draft went on, we got Malik Washington, who I'm super excited about.
Mm.
We went and got Jalen Wright out of the running back out of Tennessee, which, whatever. He's going to be good, but I'm just saying, whatever. We go get the other Taj Washington in the 7th round. We go sign an OBJ. We get Jonnu Smith.
Mm.
As the draft went on and seeing free agency, and I'm curious what you think of this. I had the theory, and I've ran this by Coach as well, that to Mike McDaniel and to the offensive staff, while our offensive line did get destroyed by injuries, it feels like they are taking the approach that the reason we struggled and fell apart at the end of the year was less the offensive line and more if your name wasn't Hill or Waddle, you just weren't winning.
Right.
There were times, I'll use the last game of the year, important drive, we're going to Chase Claypool and he runs an awful route.
Mm-hmm.
It's picked. I think I forget if it was Buffalo or might have been Tennessee, but there was one where we had a play called for Cedric Wilson over the middle, and he just couldn't beat the nickelback.
Right.
And who ended up getting a sack. So so as everything goes on, it's like, okay, they're fine saying we're going to run with the health, and hopefully one of Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg, Jack Driscoll can be a good right guard.
Right.
But did you see similar things like looking back or watching film this year? Or to you, is it really just because, offensive line was part of it, but no team when you're starting backups to backups of offensive line can
right.
hold up.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, that was a big part of everything. Was the offensive line and having, you got scout team guys running out there and you're too deep and, really struggling to secure those positions and injury. I'd say, I think that's a great point about the receivers, especially when we heard about the selling point to OBJ being, look how often these guys were double teamed. And I think as fans, it's for me personally, it was easy to be complacent with Waddle and Tyreek and say, well, why isn't this working? But defenses are very complex and they know how to adjust to players like that. And so I definitely understand now, everything kind of settling down and the emotions get out of it. And you're like, this was actually probably the right thinking. Because I loved our offensive line when we were healthy, and with Aaron Brewer, we know his skill set. He's going to fit this offense well, I think. And then the competition at right guard, I thought Liam Eichenberg at the very end of the year, I don't remember what game it was, but there were some flashes of him where he seemed like he could be a decent player. And clearly they see something too, because he's still on the roster,
Mm-hmm.
So there's something there. And so I understand it.
Yeah, when you had towards the end of the season, you got to remember too, we had Waddle playing on one leg, Hill playing on one leg, A-Chain playing on one leg.
Oh my gosh.
Moser playing on one leg. only 2 starting offensive linemen. So, yeah, we're going to slow down a little bit when that happens.
Right.
Mason, who is your pick for – well, what – if you had to guess today, what is your starting offensive line for the Dolphins come week 1?
So definitely Teron, Isaiah Wynn. I think Aaron Brewer is going to win that center job. Austin, really, okay, ideally, I hope Patrick Paul gets to the NFL and something clicks, and that guy can be our right tackle, because you can figure things out with him in the run. Maybe teach him new things to correct some of that technique. And if you get the hands fixed, maybe you move Austin Jackson to right guard. And I would hate that for Austin Jackson, because I don't like switching linemen like that. I don't think that's good. But that seems like it would be the most effective line to me. And that's in a world where Patrick Paul, pans out early on. Without that, I think Jack Driscoll's definitely got a chance. Rob Jones, it's tough. It's gonna have to wait for camp to hear who's performing well and who's not, because I think that position, the right guard position, is wide open.
Liam Eichenberg, Pro Bowl season loading.
Hey, let's do it. Let's do it.
Speaking of Ike, what do you see that he needs to, like? Because I don't think anybody saw Austin Jackson making the jump he did. So I think we all are like, year 4, it's time to move on. And then he gets the extension. Right. Ike's entering year 4. What does he need to work on the most, I should say, to make that jump? Is it just as simple as he needs to work on his balance? Is it hands? Is it strength? Or
yeah, in all honesty, I couldn't tell you a singular thing he needs to work on. I think, to me, when I watched him, the game seemed fast, and there's that common kind of belief that offensive linemen, and we saw it with Austin Jackson, that towards that 3rd and 4th year that something seems to change. It's very rare you find offensive linemen that are super effective players in year 1. But if you look at them as they go across their rookie contract, that effectiveness starts to improve, just because I think it's a really, really tough position to learn. And there's definitely deficiencies from the NFL to all levels of college football and high school football of how the position's being taught. And everybody learns differently. And you hear there's always multiple ways to skin a cat. And so maybe it's just finding that right kind of teaching for these guys.
For me, when I watch Eichenberg play, so what we've been doing with him the last couple of years, he's been playing all over the place. He's played some left tackle, he's played some right guard, he's played some left guard, he's playing center. I just think he needs to go right guard and stay at right guard. Mm-hmm. And I think that fixes him. When you look at the 6 games he played in last year, he gave up 1 sack at right guard. Just move the guy to right guard and let him play there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really that. I think I agree with you. I think that's what they should do, because it's impossible for guys to develop when they're bouncing all over the line like that. I mean, that's been the biggest issue with Evan Neal, is you keep flip-flopping him from left to right tackle, and it's just like, well, you got to give the guy a chance somewhere and really make sure if this isn't the guy, and we know that. But if he is, we got to give him a chance.
Right.
Yeah. And you were talking about the balance, the differences in level from college to pros. I remember listening to Greg McElroy and Rick Neuheisel a couple years ago on the radio, and Neuheisel said the big thing right now is a lot of states are going to 7-on-7s more in college. So you're getting these kids, and what's happening, kind of like I think you kind of know from experience, is you're a tight end or DN in high school. You get to college and they're like, you ever think about being an offensive lineman? Well, right. You're thinking about it now. Is that kind of like, just from personal experience, because I know you talked about it earlier, is that kind of how things went too? Is you're like, well, I think I'm going to do this, and then you get into the camps and they're like, you're an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the weird thing. Was it reminds me, like, the position has changed now, right? Like you're looking at for different skill sets, I think now than maybe you were 30 or 40 years ago. Of course, like every position, but I do think like I watch a lot of basketball players, and I'm like, just like the one I think Jazier Jackson that just signed with Georgia, the overtime elite basketball player, and you look at a guy like that and you say, like we talked about earlier, some of those guys have traits that maybe at defensive end or at tight end, you're an average to below average athletic profile there, but then you switch to offensive line and that profile expands to something that's really hard to replicate. So I definitely understand why that happens. And, it's not for everybody, of course, but it's fun to see guys make that transition.
Yep. I've heard multiple scouts say that it is not only the most fun position to scout offensive linemen, but it's also the hardest to scout because you just don't know how things are going to translate because you have guys who are just mauling in college, but they're just, even if you look at SEC, ACC, Big Ten,
right,
those are elite talent. But if you're in college still, the talent discrepancy is enough that if you're bigger than everybody, you can just rely on that. But just see how many guys they're bigger than everybody, but it doesn't translate once you get to the NFL.
Right. Yeah, no, without a doubt, you hit it on the head.
And it's the same thing with high school ball, man. You get some big kids, and they're maulers. But when you get them into a camp or something like that, they can't move. They don't have no hips. They can't throw their hands. They're not nimble on their feet. They can't get around to seal off a block. But when you look at them on tape, you're like, damn, this kid's throwing everybody around. But once you move to the upper level, it all changes, and you got to be an athlete too.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt.
Something I've also heard a lot of people say when grading offensive line is they're like, especially with PFF, they're like, it is so hard. Well, this isn't from PFF. This is from other people I know. They're like, it is hard to grade offensive line because if someone looks like they made a mistake, it was probably the person next to them.
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't really follow, like how important, especially not just that, like in our blocking scheme with the Dolphins, but also in Clemson's blocking scheme under Garrett Riley, how important is it for you not only to communicate with your other offensive linemen, but to like tight ends, receivers, the quarterback, and even if not mistaken, a lot of people are like, oh, the quarterback needs to ID the defense. A lot of schemes now are the centers actually doing that work now, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. No, that's communication. I never understood it. In high school, you make one call, and that was kind of it. In college, it's a totally different game because alignments change at a split second. Safeties fill run gaps. There's all sorts of things going on. And so for me, like I'm in a constant kind of state of observance and communication. So I'm watching everything, seeing everything unfold pre-snap and kind of communicating based on whatever my play is. But like you said, I mean, it's really tough to evaluate offensive linemen, especially like for me, like I've been able to learn the different schemes and stuff. So I can kind of watch and see, you can watch like the first couple steps and figure out, okay, they're running outside zone or inside zone, or you can watch the track of the running back sometimes, but it just is really difficult, I think. And it makes for some unfair grading sometimes, I think, but it just comes with the territory. It's a tough position.
Yeah. Now with your grading, who is one guy, we can go both ways. Who is one guy you were so dead sure was going to be amazing, and then they just you're like, yeah, we're just gonna forget about that. And then who's another guy who just came out of nowhere, and you're like, where's this guy been the whole throughout this film?
Yeah, honestly, I think I'll answer about the guy I wasn't high on, and then he really impressed. O'Cyrus Torrence for the Bills. I wasn't a fan. I didn't think he was a super technically strong player coming out of Florida, but then he went to Buffalo and really was a good player for them. And that offensive line's impressive as it is. So he's kind of the one for me that definitely wasn't high on that I think came in and did a good job. I'd say I'm not sure. I wouldn't. They didn't. Charles Cross has done a great job in the NFL, but that was the one guy that of anybody I've ever watched, I was like, this is it. Like if there's a player to grade anything against in pass protection, especially, it was Charles Cross for me. So that's one of those guys. I loved Zach Tom coming out of Wake Forest. I thought he should have been a first rounder, and I remember, I think maybe Chris Kaufman, I think, said the same thing, and I respect him and his opinions a lot. So that made me feel good about myself. But yeah, those are probably.
I remember he was, because that was the year we drafted Channing Tindall, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That is one I will forget that draft.
Yeah, you kind of want that one back now.
Yeah, they were all everybody in our Discord was wanting Leo Chanel, and he went a pick after us. So, well, maybe Tyndall will put it together. But
yeah,
no, I remember Zach Tom was another one. I think he was available when we drafted as a comma, but I'm willing to give as a comma another year too. But just shows like. But you're talking about about Cross. Ironically, I feel like the two offensive linemen picked before him, Evan Neal, and then the NC State kid. I forget his name. Yeah. It seems like they're the ones struggling the most, and they were the two that everybody was like, surefire can't. And it just shows you just how much going to like a place that's not stable can really ruin. People talk about quarterbacks like we'll talk Dolphins with Tua. Everybody was willing to write him off when we had 5 offensive coordinators in 2 years for him.
Right.
But no one talks about it with the offensive line. Like, I think at the same time, we had 3 offensive line coaches in that time. 4, I think, because I think the first guy got fired in like the first week of training camp.
Right. Yeah. And that's another, argument to be had with Eichenberg and of course Austin Jackson was, I think, now what's his name? It's Butch
Barry.
Yeah, Butch Barry. He seems like he's done a phenomenal job. And getting another year with those guys and with Patrick Paul, I mean, we may see a different kind of development with our linemen now that there's some stability at that coaching position.
I believe Jordan, who usually does the show with us, he's taken a couple weeks off. I believe he's the one that told me the stat. This is the first year we've had the same offensive line coach in back-to-back seasons since Joe Philbin.
That's insane.
Yeah, so
that's insane.
Just tells you how much turnaround, and you learn offensive line coach. If you don't have them, it's very hard to get. And
right,
I go back.
You also have to think about the first 2 years with Tua. He had a defensive head coach who was defensive minded. He's playing small ball. He wasn't going big time on offense. He just want to move the ball, score enough points, maybe win on the last possession of the game. And then you had all the offensive turnover those first 2 years. This is going to be Tua's third year with Mike McDaniels.
Yeah.
Second year with the line coach. So the offensive coordinator has been around for now the third year. So usually a quarterback, when they enter the pros, if they're able to keep their coach for 3 years, their third year is usually their biggest jump while they're in the NFL. So we should see a huge jump out of Tua this year. So we're going to see what happens. I think it's going to look good this year. So
yeah, I do too. I'm really excited about this season.
We had a coach and I talked to OJ McDuffie 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, and he said he was expecting over 40 touchdowns for Tua. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's a little lower than that or higher?
The only reason I'd say no is just looking at our backfield. That's the only thing. But without a doubt, like I'm so high on Tua. I love him. I think he's the perfect quarterback for this team. But there's just we got a good offense. I mean, this is going to be really fun.
Yep.
There's only one football, right?
Yeah, right.
There's only one, and traditionally,
one football.
If you look at this offense traditionally that McDaniel comes from, they do tend to, you get into the red zone, tend to run the ball more too, which we probably won at least a playoff game or two if we ran more in the red zone. Or if we didn't run so many end zone fades to Tyreek Hill. I like Tyreek, but I think that worked the first time, but not once the rest of the year.
Yeah, that was a fun experiment.
I'm saying there's a possibility Tua might go on a tear this year. He might hit the 50 touchdown mark.
I could see it.
Well, speaking about Tua, do we make the same mistake we made with Christian Wilkins last year, or do you think we get the extension done before camp?
I think they'll get the extension done. I hate it. I always hate this stuff because it's just funny. People like kind of get upset about how much guys get paid, and we all have to remember it's not our money. And it doesn't really mean these guys all know what they're doing. There's so many other factors at play. So I hope he gets paid as much as possible. I hope we pay him more than Trevor Lawrence. I hope he gets 56 a year because I think you got to double down sometimes on guys like that.
Yeah, our producer's in Croatia right now partying, but he basically has changed. You on Discord, he changed his name to Fire Chris Greer until Tua. Basically, he's like the name is not changing until Tua gets the extension.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's not our money, and people are like, "Well, Tua shouldn't get $250 million." Like, well, that's what a good quarterback goes for,
right?
Yeah.
In a year, it won't even look that bad in a year.
No.
They're going to be like, oh, he's the 17th, 18th highest paid quarterback in the league.
Right.
So a year from now, when Mahomes gets paid and Allen gets his update on his check, it's going to look completely different.
Yeah, when Stroud hits the 70 per year mark in a couple years, the 56 years for Tua is going to look pretty good.
Oh yeah, look at Daniel Jones right now. He's making $40 million a year, and you think, well, he's terrible, but what, $40 million isn't that bad.
Right, it's a mid-tier quarterback with this benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah, and speaking of CJ Stroud, I think local for you, I think Bryce Young is going to have a Tua-like jump because, like I said, you're down there. I don't know what the feeling is locally down there, but I remember thinking getting Frank Reich was good. I thought they put a good coaching staff together, and then it turns out no one was on the same page.
Right.
So,
yeah, I've always just kind of had a soft spot for the Panthers living here my whole life, and so I definitely I like Bryce Young. And it was weird. I agree. I thought that was going to be a good situation, and then it just didn't work out. But hopefully, it does this year for sure.
Yeah, it seems to be. My uncle lives down in Rocky Mount, so he says it seems like he said there's definitely a different vibe down there right now.
That's good.
And just to are there I was also curious about this. I was going to ask you this earlier. Do you notice any similarities in coaching as we just lost Mason? So give him a couple minutes to get back.
Yeah.
But
hey, sorry.
No, that's good. You're good. No, I was going to ask, what are the do you notice any similarities between Coach McDaniel and the Clemson staff and the message they bring, or any style, like in what you're asked to do schematically or anything?
I'll say I think Garrett Riley's got like a similar kind of swagger as what Mike portrays. Kind of like a guy that you're really like, you know what, like I can rally behind this guy. Like just kind of that vibe where you feel comfortable and prepared. It's kind of reassuring, that confidence. So I think they have that similarity. That's what comes to my mind first.
Tell me.
Right. I think I saw that you guys are playing your first offensive coordinator in Georgia now, right? Because the offensive.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because he's working at Georgia, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the difference between him and?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Coach.
No, you're good.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, Mason. What was the difference between your Coach Riley and the first coordinator you got? Is it just message? Is it just anything?
Honestly, I couldn't really say. my experience, my first year was just kind of putting my head down and doing scout team stuff. The offense, I mean, from an offensive line standpoint, it doesn't change too much. There's the joke that every offense is really the same. And so it's just kind of, for me, that first year, I was just kind of doing what I could. But yeah, they were both great coaches. They were both awesome.
So Coach Luke is still offensive line coach down there, right?
Yep.
Okay. So tell me how intense that guy is, because every time I see that guy on the sideline, I look in his face and I go, holy shit, that guy is a tough guy. Is he tough down there?
Oh my gosh. It's so infectious, the kind of energy that he brings. I've never seen anything like it before. And it's like, I think sometimes when people say that, you think of that coach that gets in your face and screams at you and makes personal remarks and stuff like that. And that's not him. He's just charged differently than everybody else. He loves it. So
he demands it. He demands you that you do great and you become what you're supposed to be. You can see it in that guy, man. That guy demands greatness.
Yeah, and he'll celebrate the wins with you. That's, the best part is you go on a long drive and a scrimmage or something, and there's this one play we ran the Jalen Hurts tush push, and I just get up and he's got his hoodie on and he's hooping and hollering. It was awesome. He's great.
Did he give it to you guys in the film room when you do something wrong?
Yeah, I mean, just like any other coach would, he just makes sure we know what we did wrong and teaches us how to correct it.
All right. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, going back to college football, just going to leave you a couple things because it's going on an hour. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mason, who is your preseason pick for the Heisman? Jordan and I we were doing it weekly. And we will say this, and it's on Spotify. We called Jaden Daniels way before anybody else.
Oh, really?
And I will not hear anybody. And I think it was by week 3 where, no one's talking about this kid, and he's having statistically the best season since Joe Burrow. So
yeah,
I gotta ask who you think's gonna be that, or is Prime gonna get his son hyped all the way to New York?
That's funny. Honestly, I really don't know. I don't pay too much attention to all that stuff. I definitely see it going to one of the quarterbacks, so per usual. But I really couldn't say.
So give me 2 names on your team. Who are the 2 dogs? Who are the 2 dogs on your team where everybody is like, yeah, I don't want to get in the way of that guy?
Yeah, I don't mean to reshare the same names, but our tackles, I'm really, really looking forward to see how they play. I mean, those are 2 guys I definitely think they could both go on day one, just the way that they both develop and the way that they play the game. So those are my picks. Got to support my guys.
Well, Mason, thank you for the time. Going to get ready to get going because Canada-Argentina is about to start soon, and I'm a big soccer fan. Speaking of soccer, don't know if you knew this, but the captain of the Olympic team for the U.S., Tanner Tessman, is actually the godson of your coach.
Yeah, no, I'm in a group chat with Tanner Tessman somewhere on Snapchat, from way long ago, and I was like, oh wait, that's Tanner Tessman.
Yeah, so I'm expecting them. I hope they medal this. I will say this. I'm waiting for that. Coach, I think we're like I said, we're calling this the season finale. We're gonna pick it up soon. Mason, I believe we're gonna be talking to Richmond Webb. If you want to join for that, you are more than welcome.
Awesome.
But everybody listening, when you watch it, definitely follow Mason on Twitter at MSNJHNSTN. Already really good. One of the best follows. I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. One of the best follows when it comes to draft stuff. So appreciate the work you put in. So
good luck this year.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Thank you for taking time out of your day, and good luck.
Thank you.
I guess.